Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Tech Talks with the Tech Recruiter. I'm very pleased to introduce you to my guest for today. Dave is actually someone that I've been in touch with for some time, and he's a product manager. And today's exciting topic, is going to be product management. So Dave, firstly, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Dean. I mean, it's been a pleasure chatting with you every time I did. So I'm going to enjoy this conversation for sure.
Absolutely. And folks, for those of you who've been following the show for a while, I really wanted to bring someone in the product management space because it's a very exciting space. And I've been in touch with Dave for it feels like a few years, but maybe I don't know, maybe it's less than I think at least a year or two, right, Dave? Yeah, it definitely feels like a few years. And what I like about Dave is, and I've been in touch with him as a recruiter. So I was mostly in touch with him regarding, opportunities and this and that. Now, I personally wasn't able to help Dave, but what really stood out to me about Dave is really his passion for his space and for his area of expertise. So soon as I thought about, okay, I had to do something on product management, Dave is the first guy I thought about, and I reached out to him. I was like, Dave, I got to have you on the show. So again, Dave, really appreciative that you're giving your time to let the viewers know about this very exciting space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So Dave, before we begin, and just so that the viewers kind of know more about you, can you please tell the viewers more about yourself and some brief introduction about your background?
Sure. Yeah, and I try to keep it as different from an interview as possible.
Okay.
That'd be very nice of me. But how you and I got in touch on LinkedIn was the fact that I was a newcomer. I moved to Canada a little over a couple of years back. So it's been 2 years for me and my family here. And professionally, obviously, in a new country, breaking in, it takes a lot of learning about the ecosystem and getting to know. Obviously, you are one of the more active one here. I don't know a lot of people with LinkedIn live access. There are a few those who have following and so on. And that's how we connected. As far as I am concerned, I used to be a software engineer. I am from India. So I started out my career in technology doing whatever came our way, because there are a lot of services companies in India. Mm-hmm. And you do whatever the client needs you to do, whether it's server administration, database design, software engineering. It's really in the spectrum of technology broadly. You do whatever gets you going, if that makes sense. So I have a broad spectrum of skills, but since say about 2009, my first intentional choice was the industry where I wanted to work in, where after the recession, it made sense to work in a recession-proof or an industry which would be averse of the damages that a recession or a depression comes with. And healthcare was one of the obvious choices. That was the first, and what that entailed was data, a lot of data. So I have a significant background in data, business intelligence, analytics, big data analytics tools, those kind of things. So for a good part of my career, I have worked, at least half of my career, I've worked on software engineering, data tools, and so on. And then the second intentional choice was to move into product management. Now, you would hear a lot of people say that they stumbled into product management accidentally, which is great because they had some skills and they had the alignment. But if you come from a place where you have very little choices, and product management is a very, very up and coming discipline over the last decade or so in India, there were not a lot of opportunities that existed. You had to make an intentional choice that comes from like a scar tissue of, I want to have a say in what gets built, because it was happening in such a way that I'm getting advanced in terms of technology and what can be done for the customer, and I understand. However, I don't have any influence on what gets shipped out. And so that's how this entire quest started. And I did an MBA, quit my job, started my own startup, failed, lost a bunch of money, worked for a couple of other startups which failed. Then one which I like to call it a salvaged failure, but they would call it a success because it became an acquisition that's kind of in the data analytics, data sciences, AI, ML space. And now I am working as a product manager in the AI group in General Motors after a little bit of obviously ups and downs in the new country. That's a little bit about my profile. I am really enthused by product, everything product, which is a lot of thinking about who are going to be the users, actualization of innovation. Your name on a patent on hundreds of them are good, but then you are waiting for someone else to come and license those patents or use it, right? If you get to use it and give it to the hands of users, people, that's only when a product makes money and a business kind of make money and grows, right? So that's kind of my area of interest professionally, among a bunch of other deep philosophical interests that I have.
Nice, awesome, awesome, amazing. Yeah, and folks, again, clearly, Dave is very much a great positive, I think, role model, and also a success story, right? I mean, given that what he has been through and his experiences in life, I think we can definitely all learn a lot from it. So Dave, I mean, most of the viewers that are tuning in are definitely from a tech background, but there might be some people who simply have an interest in technology. So for those viewers who might not be familiar with this space, can you explain what exactly is product management? And secondly, what is the specific role of a product manager?
It's quite broad. I will just kind of narrow the scope of this. Product management is now fairly commonly used as a term, even in startups. So there is a lot of traction of this role. If you would ask people who are not very familiar with this, there are a few friends of mine who would say, oh, you're a product manager. You have chosen the right career path. Sundar Pichai, the Google CEO, used to be a product manager. And I was like, that's not why I chose to be a product manager. But, the thing is that the larger technology companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, the FAGMA, if you will, or NAFTA, whatever you want to call that, Amazon, Apple, those guys, they had this since decades now. The discipline, and this came about as a need that the core idea is that you don't want to build solutions again which people don't use, because you are predestined in the market to fail. If you see any statistics, what you will find is that there is a lot more failure rates, whether it's Nielsen saying 80% of CPG products failing at launch, or 90% of startups overall empirically over the last decades or so failing. Venture capital over 10 years or so returning like 8.1%, which is just a little bit more than back account. So that most of these fail. And even if you're a large company with unlimited resources, you still want to mitigate risk, right? And you want to build stuff that people want. So the essence of product management is these two words. Product is essentially packaged solutions, I'd like to call, which meets and solves user needs, and in exchange of some value. Now that value is no longer tied to or confined to just currency or money. It could be time, attention, and other stuff when you talk about Netflix, right? Where $10 is not a lot of money for you, but if you spend hours and hours, that would essentially add up to a lot more, right? So that's the product aspect of it. And management is like the overarching job function, because there are lots of different bifurcations or branching out of product managers. So the overarching job function, which is sort of the glue. So if product is a collage of features and you're like cutting out different pieces and making sure that that meets the need of a user or a human being or a large group of human beings, now you're putting them together. That requires design, that requires marketing, that requires research, that requires sales, all these different disciplines. Product management is essentially someone who can translate amongst these different groups and add as a glue to ensure and take responsibility of the success or failure and learnings of the product. That's kind of what a product management function is. Now, the second part of your question was, what are the responsibilities? That is where it kind of branches out, right? Depends on what kind of company you are in, right? You could be in a company like Spotify, which is a consumer product. You and I both use Spotify, right? Or you could be in a company like General Motors, which makes cars. Now, what happens in those companies, which makes a large, fairly complex product, is you are in subdivisions or subgroups of the different components or the logically coherent component group. Like in case of cars, it would be like the engine transmission. That's like the power system, right? In EVs, that would be batteries. The seating and the interiors are different from this, right? Largely. So you are essentially in groups of people responsible for the subcategories in consumer products, right? Now, people have understood a lot more complexity in product management. So there are specific product managers who are in data and AI space because it requires specific line of thinking and understanding. Then there are product managers focused on growth. Then there are product managers who would be specifically for B2B, or people would call SaaS product managers and stuff like that. So what your job entails is to essentially maximize the outcomes, measurable metrics, revenue, and those kind of things. As a product manager, you are essentially responsible for all the failures, and you pass on the responsibility for success to all your team members. That's basically what
Got it. Okay.
product management is all about.
Okay, awesome, Dave. And now, Dave, a quick question now. Obviously, not all companies or maybe not all teams actually have product managers. Is that right, or is it the case that every?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So where is kind of the I guess the line drawn where they say, okay, we need a product manager? Like, is there such a point like where a company would say, okay, right, we definitely need a product manager from this point onwards, or we now have that need? And like, what's kind of the line that divides a team that needs a product manager versus a team that does not?
Well, that's a great question. I think there are two main lines of thinking that you got to pursue in this. One is whether your approach in the market is that of a product company. Like, you could be perfectly fine being a consultant and providing some services, right? You got to make a conscious choice to say that I am going to pursue product. And I'm going to talk about something very mundane. So let's say I am a gardener, right?
Okay.
And if I just provide the service of going and mowing people's lawns, and I want to keep it as that, and I charge hourly, there's no need for product management. So if you take that and say, I'm a web development company and I'm producing software for other people, which is basically driven by requirements of other people, right, I don't really need it. But if I want to package, in the gardening example, let's say I want to give you my own set of seeds. I want to package some ancillary services. Now I can package this service as a product, which will have tiered pricing models, right?
Okay.
So there is like a conscious decision that you make. In other cases, what happens is, like in a lot of startups, you would build out a product. So I have seen companies which are services companies that will try to build out a platform and become a product company, because that's kind of how Indian tech ecosystem evolved. And I've also seen companies here who would make a product, and now they would get a massive customer, like say Rogers or whatever. Now their roadmap kind of goes out of the window when they acquire this behemoth of a customer like Bell or Rogers or someone, right? They really become now a feature team or a delivery team for whatever customization the customer asks for. In that sense, you could just have a relationship manager or a project manager. But a product manager is really, really required if you have a coherent product strategy, which means that you have a vision of what you want to deliver in the market. Now, granted that that vision will not stick its linear course. It will go up and down. You will learn things from the market. You will pivot. But you will still honor your strategy and your vision while it changes, rather than just sell out and do someone else's development work, if that makes sense. So if you are a services company and a customization company, then you don't need product managers. They end up working as project managers. And this is really an interesting point where a lot of frustration arises, because even people like Marty Kagan, he is an author of a book called Inspired, and he runs something called Silicon Valley Product Group. The guy was at a chief product position, I think, in eBay and a bunch of other companies like HP and stuff like that.
Right.
And what he says in his trainings is that what we are running right now are delivery teams. We are doing project management, and we are building out features, and we are running feature factories. But a product manager's job is also to say no to all the features which does not add any value to our overall strategic imperative as a product company.
Okay.
Right? So you have to say no more than you say yes. If you just build everything, then it doesn't help.
Okay, got it, gotcha. Okay, and now, Dave, you mentioned kind of briefly, you mentioned the concept of a product management roadmap. So can you describe for the viewers, and also myself, obviously, can you describe a typical product management roadmap? Like, what is that, and what does that look like?
Sure. Well, yeah, roadmap is also one of these things where I don't know what you would think of, but a lot of people who have worked in Excel and worked for, a few decades would immediately think of a Gantt chart. It's like lines and dates, and your horizontal axis is essentially time, and you say what you're going to develop and when you're going to build it, and it just kind of forms this waterfallish step-by-step thing. There are also swim lanes and few products like RoadMonk and stuff which allows you to roadmap. Basically what you're saying is that, hey, over the last certain measurable period of time, say intervals, 90 days, quarters, and year. This is what we are trying to build. Now, whatever you're trying to build would require some DevOps component, some technical front-end component, from back-end component. It would require some marketing, some branding, some other activities like selling, learning from customers, those kind of things, right? A roadmap essentially is a picture, a diagrammatic representation of what you are doing when, by definition. Now, it is really not very helpful to look at it as swim lanes, because it might get confusing and complex at a larger kind of scope of things. Right. What companies which are very good with their product practices, what they would typically do is they will have a broad vision, right? Which is like, let's say, for example, for a GM, it's 0, 0, 0, 0 crashes, 0 emissions, 0 fatality. I don't exactly remember exactly, but they have got this large vision. It's right. For everyone, right? So you want to basically don't kill people. You want to build stuff sustainably. You want to preserve the environment and preserve life, right? Now that's a humongous goal, right? So you then take that and translate it down to some objectives, right? So now for our team, what are the 2 or 3 things that we can do in terms of building products or solutions for either internal or external users that will achieve those targets? Okay. So there are some mechanisms to set objectives within teams, localizing within teams, to just translate those larger strategy into smaller pieces. And those smaller pieces, then I would like to classify in 3 broad buckets, where I say discovery, delivery, and scale. Okay. Discovery is the part where you are trying to find out if you have 100 ideas, because you can generate ideas like if you think. Yeah. Now, if you have 100 ideas, which ones are gonna be bang for the buck? Which one are gonna solve the problems for customers that they're going to be willing to pay for? And then the delivery part is, how do you best deliver this? Meaning, how optimally can you just go in cycles and iteratively ship features out? And finally, when you scale, what happens is you're onboarding new people, you're maximizing revenue, you're maximizing reach, and you're seeing holes in the process. You're seeing systems break, you're seeing technology debt, and that's a whole different problem. So all of these things should kind of be harmonious, and you can say like tuning different knobs depending on what is the stage of the product, right? And that's kind of how you want to represent a roadmap, saying that this is where you are at each stage. And what is the next step? What was the previous step? Rather than giving the entire picture, which could be very confusing. And also the other thing that I heard a few people talk about, and the one that I remember is a VP of Touch Bistro, Dennis Chow. He says that, look, life happens. I could give you time of when I'm going to build it. If I know that 90% of the time I'm not meeting the target, it's not really good in any sense to commit that to your stakeholders or to the team's morale, that every time we are committing to something, we're not delivering it. So instead, communicate a lot and just give them what stage you are in, what is it that you're doing or shipping right now, and what are you going to do next, and kind of iteratively chip away, right?
Got it. Okay. Amazing. Yeah. And now you mentioned like a couple of obviously these stages of the roadmap, and I know when we spoke earlier, Dave, you mentioned the importance of the discovery aspect. And if I remember correctly, you said that this is probably the area where a lot of product managers might kind of miss out on certain things, or that the teams might kind of maybe mess up on. So like, what are some of the common errors made specifically in this discovery phase? And what are your suggestions on how to avoid these mistakes?
That's very tough as a question. I mean, fairly complicated, that question. And I honestly say that you got to get a collective understanding and learn from a lot of people who have done this for a period of time. So you got to read a lot. Right. But here's the reason why discovery is fairly intricate and complicated and nuanced. The reason why this is because, you are trying to figure out a solution set that works in an unknown realm. So there are biases, cognitive biases. You are dependent a lot on intelligent design and asking the right questions in this phase. What happens is, if you are delivering, the presupposition or premise or assumption when you're delivering something is that you have a goal, that this is what you're building and you have a backlog. So you can just go away and, different software engineers would take different amount of time, but it's fairly straightforward because the process has been defined. Yes, there are complications, something would break and there would be bugs, but it's still nearly not as complex as like going into the unknown and trying to like peep into people's brains and understand what problems they have and how you can solve them, right?
Got it. Okay.
And then when you're scaling again, you have already proven something. Now it's really about how can you optimize. It becomes a lot more of an optimization problem. Discovery as a phase is like you are trying to find out. I'd like one of the CEOs that I was listening to was putting it as you want to find out a large constitution, which basically is a very large group of people who share a common problem. So you're looking for problems, but a large group of people should have that problem, and you should have ideas of solving it in a unique way, right? So it kind of steps in the territory of critical thinking, design thinking, and you need to really zoom in and look at a big picture and zoom out. Now, I'll refer to a professor of Harvard University who recently passed away, I think in February before all this lockdown. His name is Clay Christensen, Professor Clayton Christensen. He has a framework called Jobs to be Done, which basically is what is the job that your group of users are trying to accomplish. And in his book, he talks about multiple different pieces of research. And one of the very, very easy to understand use cases is about McDonald's, the restaurant food chain, doing research on their milkshakes, right? And they're seeing when do they sell? Who are the customers, right? You're trying to understand why is something a pattern in your data, if you will, right? And so they find out that there's a lot of sales in the morning, in the beginning of the day, right? And when they look at it from that perspective, and they look at their internal data, they see that it doesn't really sell throughout the day, sells a lot in the morning, and that's the bulk of their revenues.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, the reason why that is because people who are driving to work are buying this. Now, this kind of opens up a door where you are now competing against a banana or an apple with your milkshake, right? Because what can you travel and eat? It's no longer you're competing with KFC because that is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's the part where people miss out. The biggest challenge is like we as humans have inherent biases which we don't really agree with, right? A few things that I wrote down, I guess, is that we think that we are user archetypes. We think that we are the user. I have the problem, so I'll solve it, and everyone else has the same problem. They'll use it. Wrong. It just falls flat. We don't step out of the building enough. Like any good product leader will send their team out to meet their customers and talk, because you need to see their perspective, watch what they're doing. And they might not be doing the things that you think you do in certain ways, right? We don't ask the right questions. A lot of times we ask poor research-based leading. I mean, if you look at any survey, you would see that there are leading questions. If you go and read and see if the survey is giving you some premise, some assumption and saying, oh, will you use this? Will you use this if it's $20 or $50 or something? Well, it is assuming you will use it in the first place.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay anything to say, yes, I will use it, but you will never, right?
Yeah.
So you have to ask the questions in a way that opens up these assumptions and figures out if logically you have the problem that is bad enough and you're willing to pay for it. And there's only one way to do it, like how they show in the movie Wolf of Wall Street, if you have seen it, right?
Yeah.
This part of sell me a pen. It's like, take my number. Do you have the pen? Here's the pen. Now give me the money, right? So you have to literally put the person in the spot to now know whether they're going to pay or not, right?
Yeah.
Anyone can say yes, right? They would inherently not want to mess you up. We associate with our ideas. We fall in love with them. And that's like, oh, I have gone through this myself with my startup. I don't want to change it. And then I'm losing money, bleeding money. It's not good enough. We ask our users what solutions do they need. That's also another fallacy where no, they can only say what they're doing, what their frustrations are, what their values are, and then we need to deduce, right?
Right.
So it's a lot of work around things that we think are fluffy. And you're like, oh, what, soft skill, fluffy, whatever. And I know this is how the customer will do it. Let me push it out. And lo and behold, no one has bought your product. So those are some of the main areas. Like it's inherently challenging. It's inherently complex. You need to work with design. You need to question your assumptions, go with an open mind. And you need to always go with the idea that I don't know. Maybe let me experiment and find out. Right. So that's why it is challenging, and those are the challenges.
Got it. And you mentioned something I found very, I guess, profound, Debbie. Like you mentioned the fact that you have to be asking the right questions, because and I think like even outside of, I think this applies to I think any profession, because I know
Yes.
as even as a recruiter myself, like I have to ask the right questions.
Yes.
And the way you ask the questions, also how you structure it and the way you word it,
Yes.
that makes a difference on the response. So I guess my question, Dave, like, are there, so in product management, are there guidelines for that, or do you learn through experience? Like how does product manager learn to ask good questions?
Oh man, I guess it's like you got to sit on shoulders of people who have done this before.
Right,
That's
right,
kind
okay.
of one way to mitigate your risks. Become humble and say that I don't know everything.
Right.
But it's paradoxical almost, because product managers also have this other trait that they need to embrace, which is like convincing stakeholders, influencing stakeholders without having any authority on them, and
Right, right.
translating. So it's almost like, okay, do you have this powerful lion persona that will convince everyone that whatever you think is right and get what you want to do? At the same time, you have to also be as meek as a lamb and observing and just being
Okay.
nice and figuring out. So it's just a combination of figuring it out. I'm going to recommend a book about the questions. So
Right.
there is a book called The Mom Test, written by a guy called Rob Fitzpatrick.
The mom
And
test, like as in mom, mother, like as in
yes,
mother. Okay, the
yes,
mom
yes.
test.
So the premise of the book is like, what kind of questions can you ask about your startup idea to your mother, who
Oh.
inherently loves you, and yet you can get the truth if your idea is horrible from her
Okay,
without
okay.
being offended or offending her, kind of thing.
Okay.
Because if you asked the wrong questions, your mother will always say, oh, you know what, nice, amazing, this is what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead. But if you were to ask the right questions, even she would be giving you conversationally. It's really about being open-ended, being truly curious, and trying to ask the questions in a way that you want to understand the other person's perspective. Because the name that is given to this is called user empathy or customer empathy study.
Mm.
And there is a canvas called empathy map, which basically says say, do, think, feel, which is like people say one thing, do one thing, feel one thing, think one thing, and feel one thing, right? So
Right.
you got to observe and fill up the dots about blanks about each one of these things. And that can only come out if you're asking the right questions. So I guess it's lot of reading,
Mm-hmm.
and I can recommend a few books. uh, you need to make sure you understand what are the principles, what are the processes, and how those principles and processes gets applied in different situations, which are case studies, right?
Right.
So when you look at that, you see, oh, you know what, this is what, say, Ryanair, which is a cheap airline in Europe, did to win so many customers, so much market share. However, this is what Southwest did, which would have similarities, differences. Then you look at Google's freemium model, then you look at some other case studies like that. Knowing the concepts, understanding the processes which can be followed, because product management, there are a lot of canvases and templates which we use. Okay, how do we section out or compartmentalize what we are finding, right? So there are a lot of
Mm.
these canvases that exist. So you're filling up the lean canvas for just like the overall business plan, looking at what is our proposition, what is our customer, how are we reaching them, what are we measuring, etc. We are filling out the customer journey, we are filling out the empathy maps, all of those things. Now, how do we coherently transform that into our product vision, and then therefore our specs or requirements, if you will, what we are going to build, right?
Right.
It's you got to keep on reading and looking at these concepts and how they apply to different scenarios and who is using it in what way to become better, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It makes sense. So from what and for the viewers, so Dave suggested a great book, and again, Dave, you said it's called the mom test,
Yes,
right? The
that's
mom
Rob
says, okay.
Fitzpatrick. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And so from what you're saying, David, it's a combination of your own self study and research into these various concepts and stuff like that. And also, you mentioned mentorship is also an important aspect.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There are few up and coming and few established institutions. Like I
Okay.
did an MBA from supposedly the first product management school in Asia.
Wow.
At least that's what they said. They were in India, and they had a 18-month MBA program which was focused on product management. Now there is product school, product faculty, which has classes, Brain Station. All of them have boot camp courses in Canada. I also did a product faculty boot camp. Even though I had like 18 months of that, you also need to keep on keeping an open mind, learning what is different in this
Right.
ecosystem, network, understand what's going on in different companies, what are the priorities, because you got to keep on evolving, right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Now going into, and you've kind of already touched on this, Dave, but what for those viewers who maybe they're starting out their careers in product management, or they have an interest in product management, what attributes and qualifications are required to be a successful product
Mm.
manager?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, if you just Googled what skills do you need to be a product manager, you'll find many, and
Yeah.
you will find the technical terms or the jargons, if you will, and they will say, oh, you need to have customer empathy as a skill, market research. You need to be able to prototype MVP. You should be
Yeah.
able to understand design lingo, understand technology lingo. There are new courses coming up for product managers who are non-technical to learn API, web, etc. But I like to take a little bit of a natural trait based approach. I would say
Right.
that
Right.
you need to be thoughtful, and this kind of goes back in that product faculty class. Marty Hagan gave one of the talks, and he was like, look, because we are so much in the rut and we are doing delivery in cycles, we a lot of the times the teams that he consults with, he works with, he sees that they are not actively thinking enough. And so he
Mm-hmm.
said that product managers need to know how to think, and that's almost like a rhetorical uh, you know provocative statement to make, that, oh, can you not think? But if
Yeah.
you look at it, we are surrounded by so much information, and there's just so much going on. You gotta calm yourself down, and you need to really have the critical thinking ability, questioning yourself and just thinking about what are the different possibilities that exist. That
Right.
ability is absolutely required. So you need to think of logic, question your presuppositions, your assumptions. You need to be good with research, meaning you need to be able to Google search. That's one form of research. You can also go into scholarly articles. Like if you're in
Yeah.
AI, obviously your research takes a slightly different route, and you can go to Google Scholar and look at research
Right. Right.
papers as well. You need to observe. You need to be able to stand and look at what is going on. Let's say you should go like take a walk, and these are just like practice things that I'll do. I'll go out, not trying to judge anyone. I'll just go out and stand in a space, right, and see
Mm-hmm.
people moving around. What are they doing? And kind of make thoughts around why they're doing what they're doing, right? Making their purchases, or in COVID-19, who's wearing a mask and who is not, who is maintaining social distance, who is not, any of those, right? You just like keeping these traits. Only then you can say, oh, you know what, you can stereotype almost. And while in a wrong context, stereotyping someone would be racist or whatever, in a product context, you need to stereotype people's behavior and understand whether you have a large group who does something this way or not, because that's how
Okay.
your product clicks, right? Like
Right.
the
Right.
swipe in, swipe up, those kind of things. It's all like thought within your brains, and they would say that they are doing brain science.
Yeah.
But essentially it's just like the same concept of profiling, or what cops would do.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to observe, you need to have empathy, you need to have curiosity, you need to have some development and understanding of like how different technologies come together.
Mm-hmm.
You need to just appreciate design, even if you're not a painter or like artist. I'm a poor one, you can see like pretty crappy ones back then, not like Picasso or whatever. But you need
Yeah.
to nurture these skills, right? And that's what will widen your scope. And then you can like pick up the other things, like what questions to ask a customer, how to fill up a customer journey,
Mm-hmm.
how to write a spec or a user story, or any of those things can be learned. But if you don't have those foundational traits, I believe it is tougher, because you can learn something and you would use the hammer to like bang on a screw, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't help.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that analogy. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Got it. Got it. Now, I really like that. Now, Dave, in terms of the viewers who might be, maybe they're new grads, or they're in a different area in IT, and they want to get into product management. What suggestions do you have for people in that situation where they're looking to get into product management? Like, how can they make that transition? How can they position themselves, to get into this field?
Okay. Um, so let's think about what are the different things that you need to know, right? And I'll
Mhm.
just put it together as just what you do in a product manager role, right? I have already touched upon some of these things.
Yes.
You write a lot of specification. You write a lot of what is the scope of what we are trying to build, and try to break it down so that the engineers can take it and develop it. You are responsible for the timely delivery of each iteration. you are responsible for the quality that it should work, right? So you need to, that's perhaps the easier part. Like you said, you wanted to build something that when you swipe right, it zooms in, zooms out, whatever. You need to write that properly, whatever the expectations are. Why are we building it? You need to make sure that when it's packaged and deployed, that it works. You need to be able to manage, like you need to understand what your metrics are. If there's an already established product, you need to work with the data, understand what the usage measures are, what are the correlations looking like. If you get 10 new customers, do one come back the next day, do zero pay, that kind of stuff, right? You need to also look into the surveys and the reports of people who are complaining, putting reviews if it's an app, those kind of things. What is the customer looking for? What are they happy about? What are they not happy about? How do we fix some of those challenges, or how do we design something better, right? And then you need to be able to also align with the strategy. Like I said, the 000, how does what you're doing align with the strategy? Because if you're doing something which is a tangent, it probably doesn't help the business, and you could become obsolete at some point of time, right? So you've got to be conscious about that. Align the roadmap, have a strategic impact around it. And then when you do all of these things, you also then influence people. Now, there are levels, right? So there is assistant product manager, senior product manager, group product manager, principal in some cases, then there are director, senior director, VP, that kind of spectrum, right? So as you grow, then the influence part of it, including the stakeholder in your conversations, leading a group of other people who would want the same thing, and mentoring, managing, those kind of things become more important. But that's kind of the spectrum of everything that you do on a day-to-day job, which requires the skills that I answered in the previous question. So anyone wants to get in right now as, let's say, an undergrad who is pursuing engineering or something like that. In Toronto, there is APM program. I don't remember the website offhand. I have to search for it. But if you search for, maybe, you know what, I'll actually search. Assistant Product Manager, right? So APM, right? APM, I know there is a program which is supported by Shopify, TWG, and stuff like that in Toronto. So they take intake. They have, I think, annual intake, if I'm not wrong, maybe biannual. So it's almost, it's actually apmtoronto.com.
apmtoronto.com. Okay, excellent. Excellent.
So they are, again, TWG, Shopify, FreshBooks, League, Ritual, Loblaws, all sorts of big and small guys are there. It's basically a bootstrap program where it will allow you to become an intern or work with these companies, right? So for an entry-level person, it will allow you to work with these companies, and that would work for students. Even companies like GM has rotational programs where when we hire undergrads, they, for the first 3 years, every 6 months, they work in different teams, right?
Right.
So you get different exposure. That's also another way. Now, for someone who is experienced, like, let's say, depending on your experience, where you're coming from, your pitch should be different. So for me, I come from a software engineering data background. Therefore, my pitch is, again, going up, playing to my strength and saying that I know technology. Therefore, technology, product management, data product management makes sense. If you came from a marketing background, if you came from a sales background, then growth product management would make sense. If you came from selling SaaS software and you understand the nuts and bolts of SaaS, then maybe you can go for SaaS. So it's really like that. You got to look at the role that you're trying to transition off into. And I have seen in my past experience, it's easier to get the role internally transition into the organization. Like you take a course, say that you're doing professional development. A lot of companies give you a budget to do that. So they already know that you're learning. You talk to those teams and then you move. Because if you don't have the position, getting a new role without the APM program for newer people would be slightly challenging, which I kind of experienced firsthand in Canada.
Okay, understood. So basically, what you're saying, Dave, leverage your existing strengths, and then also you're saying try and make that transition within your current organization. That would be the best option for most people. Okay, makes sense.
And use network and people like you if that kind of works out, right?
Right, absolutely. Okay, sounds good. Now, Dave, like if you taking a look at the future, right? Like how do you see the role of the product manager evolving? Like, is it going to change drastically? Like, what do you think is going to be happening?
Well, what I'm seeing already happen is that all these branch outs that I already mentioned, the technology innovation that is coming up about especially in the digital phase or even in the physical space, because the physical space is not the physical space anymore. Even in the car, you got to think of, oh, what VR experience we can give or whatever. That's kind of the thought process, right? Everyone is going for a hybrid experience, right? So I think what is happening is that people are realizing or recognizing the complexity of each of these disciplines. Sorry, with AI, AR, VR, blockchain, these are not simple things. There is a lot of nuts and bolts, lots of moving pieces, hardware, software, technology, right? So what is happening is what you can call like a division of labor, division of work. And that happened initially, it was just like internal product manager, B2C and B2B. B2C, no one called B2C because, okay, it was understood that the product is used by consumer. B2B is that. Now, B2B products now could be still, there are some primitive solutions which are on mainframes. They are not SaaS or cloud or one of the newer fancy things, right? So now SaaS became another category. So what I'm seeing is like a lot of division and categorization or demarcation of this, which again is not new, but it's becoming mainstream because companies like Facebook, what they would do is like their feature is a product, like just news feed is a product. Just the like button could be a product because you are essentially trying to make that button the star of the show, right? And then they make you compete. So their setup is such that every logical segment of a product itself is a product, right? And product managers own the roadmaps of those specific parts. So there's like a lot of division of labor. And I think it's becoming increasingly apparent that there is a specific group of people who are becoming technology product managers. So that's a fusion of technology and product management. And there's another group who would be essentially more around the customer and the design side. It's apparent in companies like Amazon and stuff like that. But again, that's also, I think, becoming mainstream as the complexities increase. And one person cannot really do all of this even in like 15-hour days. Like it becomes too much to do for like one group of one team of people, like if you give everything to do.
Right, absolutely. Okay. Now before we kind of start wrapping this up, Deb, I guess you have again, you're very much an example of a success story. Like you came new to the country and you got into a everyone knows GM. Like I don't think there's anyone who doesn't know GM, right? And it's a very highly competitive, obviously, organization, right? I'm sure they put out a posting. They probably get like hundreds of people applying.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly, right? So what advice do you have for others who might not, and not just the newcomers, but even just anyone in general, like, and they're applying for these roles at maybe large, well-known organizations? What advice do you have on how people can really separate themselves and really capture the attention of these organizations?
Well, what has seemed to work, I'll first say what worked in my case. What worked in my case is, again, a personal connection like you, which was another recruiter who is based out of London, by the way. He was in Toronto for a little while.
Oh, right. Okay.
Met over coffee, and I precisely told him this is what I was looking for. And, weird stroke of connection, he connected with the hiring leader or team lead of this team that I have joined.
Nice.
Who was looking for this person. And when he described what he wanted, this guy had me in mind, just like how you had me in mind to talk to, right?
Yeah.
So I think connecting at a deeper level and making your intentions, your strength, and what you're going towards known would help. But that's obviously not scalable because at any given point of time, if you're sitting with someone over coffee, that's how you connect. I mean, I wouldn't consider meetups because you are like listening to someone else.
Yeah.
You get a little bit time to talk, right? But if you want to spend like an hour with someone, you can only do so many.
Yeah.
The other thing that I know have worked for some creative people is just to like write about how this company or product that you're trying to get at can do something differently. So you take a product and you could kind of dissect it apart and say, hey, this is how I would do it if I were a product manager working there. Oftentimes that's a question that is asked in many product management interviews, like, oh, if you were on board, how will you approach it? Talk us through your vision of the product and how you're going to like build out the roadmap, et cetera. So if you wanted to like think about it, make a presentation, write about it, those kind of things, I know people have attached it along with their resumes or applications, and that obviously shoots up your level. I think the other thing, which is sort of a very, very common understanding is clarity. Like a lot of people want to do a lot of things, but
Yeah.
I believe I gave you the impression of what my profile is in a clear enough way.
Absolutely.
Where the bad thing about that is that rules me out for a lot of different job opportunities, and I'd have to potentially wait. However, it sets me up perfectly well for the one which I am a fit to, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little counterintuitive where you have to say no to many, but I find it hard myself. Yet it's something that you should write down, and it could be like 2 or 3 different branch offs of where you can see yourself in,
Right.
but have clarity and do a lot of research. And I would say, like, for a product manager, reading is not an option. I mean, I can give you a list of books that you can attach to your post when you're posting this video on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Or wherever you're posting it. Like 3-4 books are mandatory. You need to understand how you do customer development, how you ask questions. Because like I said, the easiest part that anyone and everyone knows is how to use Scrum. Okay, how you write a backlog and how you use Jira or how you use like TFS or something. That's the easiest thing. Okay, 2 weeks I'll put 20 tasks and it will be so many people, and 10 people will every day come to a stand up and say, this is what we are working on. That's the easiest. The discovery is the toughest, and the second toughest one is the scale part, because now you're like stuck with system problems and you have to fix it. So you need sharp engineering minds. It's not really in your hand. You got to motivate them to fix your problem. But I'm going to give you some books which people should read when they're thinking about product management, and then they would also find their thoughts develop further by reading them. And if you are like really can't wait, then take one of the courses. I would recommend Product Faculty, because I know Mo actually is a chief product officer of a company now. He used to be a senior director at Loblaws Digital. Has worked in Apple in the past, so he's very good and brings in really good people to talk in the curriculum. It's obviously not inexpensive, requires a bit of investment, but 6-8 weeks course, that would go a long way if you want to like jumpstart your career in that direction. And by the way, I'm not getting paid by Mo to say this or endorse any of these books.
Absolutely.
I took the course and I think it was worth my time.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. So definitely, feel free to share those links. I'll definitely post that. And folks, for those of you watching, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, I'll post the links in the comments probably. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put it in the description. So, all of you watching can check out those books recommended by Dave. Now, Dave, I did have one more thing I wanted to ask you. Like, are you okay on time? I just wanted to make sure I'm not okay.
I'm good.
So you mentioned Scrum, right?
Yeah.
So this is now this I see this common thing, sometimes on LinkedIn, kind of this debate going on where people say one should never be a product manager and a Scrum Master. Like you can't have two, like you can't be both. Like what's the deal with that? And like, what are your thoughts regarding this?
So again, context where it's due, like one of my friends, and you're kind of tearing apart a little bit of our scar tissue here.
I hope nobody hates me for this.
I hope nobody hates me for this, but I have heard a lot of my friends or colleagues who would say, you know what, there is, Scrum is an organization, right? Agile is a software development framework, which was built by software developers who are thoughtful software developers to optimize the process of building good software. What they wanted to eliminate was waste. They wanted to eliminate risk. And metaphorically, it aligns with product management ideologies. So the lean startup concept, lean canvas I mentioned, right? Agile. Now, if you look at this, it's kind of a circular reinvention and reiteration of all these things. The guy from Toyota who is credited to finding lean as a framework or Six Sigma as a quality framework, he actually came, he was like the son of the Toyota owner or something like that. And he came to US and stood at Walmart to see how people are going through stores, stocking, sales, and movement. So he took like a concept of American supermarket and brought it into car manufacturing. And then at some point of time, the idea of agile software came about, and these things have correlations and links between themselves, right? It's really a methodology to eliminate waste and build stuff that matters, right? At its ethos, at its core, that's what it is. Now, what has happened with agile, because software, right, and people need some job to do and we reinvent ourselves or whatever, it has become industrialized. So I find it fascinating, and there are several talks you'll find. If you were to search Agile is dead, you will find there are people who actually have their names in the signatory of the Agile Manifesto. One of those guys who've written books on Agile frameworks who are now saying that it is dead.
Wow.
And if you listen to it, what they are saying is that the industrial model, like safe, less, all these new things are the ones which is killing it. Because what he says is like, look, Agile is not a verb. Agile is a mindset. It's not like you are trying to be agile to do something. You're not jumping around or whatever. Now, what's Scrum as an organization? Because it's very much an organization which comes and trains you, and there is money involved in every sense of the way, right? Whether you go for Safe or Scrum or any of those, there are people who will come to your organization, train you, and there is a structure, right? They'll say, oh, this is what you follow. Now, I find it funny that one of the key things in the Agile Manifesto, there are some core values in there, right? If you just search Agile Manifesto, you'll find that online. And one of the ones is like collaboration and communication over tools and processes. And I wonder if the people in the Scrum organization at least see that they are essentially violating this and going backwards. Like if you want to communicate and collaborate over tools and processes, where you're saying that this is more important, tools and processes are important, sure, but you essentially want to collaborate and communicate and build the right thing, right? Now they'll come and tell you, oh, you know what, you're a Scrum Master, you're a product owner, and you got to do a 2 to 4 week sprint. This is how you write a story. This is how you do story mapping and all of that. And some of product management has these things. But I don't like it when someone says in the scope of Agile or Scrum, a Scrum product owner is similar to a product manager. And a lot of people say that. And it is, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to see annoying or irritating, but it is definitely discomforting to me because product management is way, way larger than the scope of Scrum, right? Now, a Scrum Master, the job of a Scrum Master is basically to ensure that a development team, a delivery team, embraces the Scrum processes properly. Talk about communication over tools and processes. There is a role which essentially is there to stand and make sure everyone follows. Now, the role is not that of a ruthless dictator, not a Hitler role, but it's that of a continuous, nagging, poking person who would be like, oh, you know what, you speak now, you're taking too much time. Do we have the stories in order? Do we have the prioritized backlog in order? I have been a Scrum Master. I still do the role of a Scrum Master as and when, as often as required. So there is nothing to say that you don't need to do it, because the role of a Scrum Master, other than making sure that the team embraces and implements Scrum in a nice way, is to get to the outcome. The outcome of a team that implements Scrum in a nice way is that everyone has a common shared understanding of what we are building. You're reducing waste by reducing like same repeated questions, duplicate work, those kind of things, right? So the team is running like a smooth machine. And then the other thing is, if anything is blocked, anything is like, some of my team members, they're trying to publish a report and they don't have access, someone can't see, etc., etc. You don't want to take the team's time. So the Scrum Master can go and unblock that blocker in most cases, right? So it's like a servant leader. So that should not take up your full day unless you're working on 20 projects, in which case you're not working in a product team, in which case you would not have a product manager. Product manager is not doing the work of a product manager. They are basically bargaining for features with customers and serving the role of a relationship manager. Unfortunately, it's fragmented. Like, any product management school right now, if you look at whatever be the thing, they will say, oh, Google, Shopify, Spotify, etc., is people who are coming and teaching us their experience, also students who are coming. Now it's like, okay, what about the other companies, right? We should at least come to learn, right? And then even when I learn and I go and I want to make change, there should be some processes in a 100-year-old company which would not be like a click of a finger for me to change, right? I have to go through the motions of like getting these things in place. So some of these organizational culture, etc., comes into the picture, into the mix, where it steps in the HR alley, if you will, culture alley. But anyone can be a Scrum Master as long as they understand Scrum as a framework properly, and the scope of it is to the development and delivery of their project. And they could, if they are working only on 1 or 2 well prioritized projects, they could devote their time to other things like growing themselves, understanding why they are building what, and move themselves into whether they want to do project management, program management in a services organization. Programs is a collection of projects. And Microsoft is an interesting example that way, because they have product managers as well as program managers. You would find the program managers exist in more customer facing roles where they're not building products. So they have projects and programs, and product managers are essentially in the side where they're developing products, right?
Right.
That's kind of like, when you understand, again, it's not about the designation. I don't want to also give that kind of impression that it's about a job role or a title. It's really about what are your responsibilities, right? And in my mind, the Scrum Master one, it initially starts out to be a bit of work, because the team has to gel with each other, and every time there are new members and there is attrition, that might require a little bit of time to ramp up, ramp down, those kind of things. But generally, when it's kind of going in cycles, it could take up 60%, 80% of your day. You would still have more time to do other things. And normally when I started in Allscripts, Scrum Master used to be a part of the software development team. So we would rotate a software engineer to be a Scrum Master.
Right.
Different companies have different ways to do it. But again, all the people who vehemently go and say that, oh, this is what Scrum says, this is what SAFe says, or some kind of agile framework says, I would first go and check if that is backed by a company who provides a certificate, and therefore a structure that is imposed in the natural workings of an organization. And then I would question if the organization is a product organization or a services one, because anything to do with disruptive innovation cannot exist in extremely narrowed out boundaries, because you don't really get time to even ideate and think about things, because it's not within your Scrum process, right? So yeah, I mean, sorry, I think I went a little long, because this obviously
no worries.
is a cart issue that you opened up.
Yeah, but no, thank you so much, Dave. You shared so much great information, and just overall, like I'm sure, I'm definitely certain and confident the viewers got so much great information from this conversation. So again, thank you so much. Now, Dave, I know when we spoke, you said you were working on like you have a blog or something. Can you tell the viewers more about that? Like, are you going to be putting out this kind of content? What can the viewers expect from following you?
Well, in the time of COVID-19, everyone is building a podcast, right? I am thinking of building a podcast of my dog barking. I was like, no, you come with weird ideas. No, for me, I think where I stand in this is that there is a lot of product content. And when I ask myself a question of where can I add a little more value, if you say the proverbial giving back a little bit of what I know, my perspectives, like I said, I'll share with you a bunch of books that people should absolutely consider reading.
Sure.
My thought was that a lot of the speakers and the teachers and the trainers, and even in B school when I went, we thought a lot about case studies. And, people love case studies. Harvard Business Review, HBR would continuously belt out. If you look at their page, they have articles after articles and essays after essays and case studies after case studies. Now, for me, it becomes essential personally, and we will find out if it's for other people or not, because it's really when the rubber meets the road that I will get the feedback, right? The idea is that I need a way to separate the concepts from the processes. And like I said, again, to reiterate, all learning broadly can be categorized as concepts, which is your theory, and the understanding of what is the principle which does not change, irrespective of whatever we might think. Then there are processes which could evolve depending on context. And then Uber would do something differently, Tesla would do something differently, General Motors would do something entirely different, depending on culture, people, all sorts of other stances, right? And your priorities. So for me, in the information economy, I see a lot of people putting out stuff like, oh, this is how you write stories, this is how you do this is how you do that. And a lot of it is defining a process within their context, which may or may not be applicable to me.
Right.
So what I wanted to do was to kind of dig a little deeper and get a repository of concepts built out. And it's finite. It's not ever ending, because I don't want to engage in a project which will take forever. But what I'm doing is I'm listing out all of the different concepts that exist in the space of discovery, delivery, and scale, right? And what those concepts might entail in terms of work, what tools that we can use to take care of a particular roadblock or a particular endeavor or an intention that we are trying to, let's say in the discovery stage, if we are doing customer development and we are doing interviews, this is a framework that we can use. These are the kind of questions we can ask. These are the supplementary books that we can read. So I'm trying to organize, if you will, like a dictionary of product management is a good
that's
way to call it.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's called Metaproduct. The domain is metaproduct.wiki, metaproduct.wiki. I will send you a link via email.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it would not have, maybe at some point it would have some case studies, but I don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of them. I could just put blog links, right? And I'm doing it with another friend of mine called Rahul. He's into cryptocurrencies. He worked in cryptocurrencies in growth.
Nice.
So he understands the growth aspect of it. Whereas I have not got so much growth experience. And we are kind of fusing together all these concepts and saying that, okay, and in very simple terms,
right?
Like I don't want to use a lot of jargon. So like, okay, you know what is a product? Like I said, it's just a package solution, solves a problem, needs exchange of value. So something like anyone can understand, and repository of concepts. And now if you want to take a course, you can go here. If you want to use this tool, use this. This is how you use it, kind of thing. It would be launching hopefully July, August timeframe. I have got an initial page set up with first 3 concepts, very broad definitions in the repository, in the link there, and people would essentially be able to come in and express interest if they want to, and give me the fuel to the fire if I should even build it, or else it can just stay in my diary because it's already there in my manuscript. A lot of those, all I'm doing is just trying to design it in a nice kind of linear isometric graphics which look nice and stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, awesome, fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, and all the best with that, Dave, as well. And so folks, those of you watching, it will be completed, you're saying, Dave, by July, August or so? Like that's when?
Yeah, when you launch the video, they'll be able to go to the link and
nice.
see an example and give their email address if they want to be notified when it is live. Right. Yeah, I'm thinking a 90-day time frame tops, and I've already started working on it about a month back. So
awesome.
Months should be
perfect. So that's metaproduct.wiki, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, and congrats on that. I mean, it sounds like a great venture. I think a lot of people will benefit from that. So make sure you check that out, folks, for those of you watching. And other than that, Dave, like for the viewers who want to maybe connect with you on LinkedIn, like firstly, are you open to new connections? Are you okay with people connecting with you? Okay.
Sure. I don't really put a lot of content. Like I'm not very regular as you are near me. But LinkedIn is the only social network that I actively use. I have a Facebook and a Twitter, but I seldom go there. LinkedIn, I go there, and I have been meaning to, but it's like I put in something or the other once in a while when I feel like something important. And surely when I build this repository out, I'll take snippets and share for exposure purposes. And if anyone has questions, I mean, a lot of people have been reaching out to me directly on LinkedIn off late. They see, they want to do this course from my B school where I studied my MBA in product management, or product faculty. And they're like, I'm considering this. What's your advice? Or, hey, I'm looking to get into design. What should I do? I lived with you as a neighbor like 10 years ago, something like that. Or someone who doesn't even know. I am more than willing to like take any questions. Feel free to connect with me, reach out. I think the default on my LinkedIn page would show follow, but you can click the drop down and connect. I am accepting connections as well.
Right.
You can send me a message. I'm more than happy to help out anyone who is looking for mentoring in this area.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks so much, Dave. So folks, Dave is very open to connecting, so make sure you do that. So, and I will put the link to his profile again. If it's in LinkedIn, in the comment section. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put it in the description, and I'll also share all the links that Dave mentioned regarding those various resources, as well as the suggested readings as well. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this up, Dave. I definitely do feel that a further conversation is warranted for the future, so I'll definitely invite you back, because I think there's just so many aspects we can talk about. But thank you so much for all the great information you shared for the viewers. And all the advice and the tips, and I know that a lot of people would definitely benefit from it. And again, all the best in your with your with the wiki page you're creating. Yeah, again, thanks so much, Dave. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, 100%. I think I really appreciate, like I said, a lot of people are doing these kind of stuff right now because you want to use the time constructively.
Yes.
And yeah, you as a recruiter kind of connecting the overall technology ecosystem. I think it's a great endeavor, and there's a reason why you're one of the few people who have LinkedIn Live access, right?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave.
Yeah.
So again, Dave, thanks so much for your time, folks. For those of you who are watching, thanks so much for tuning in and watching. Make sure you put in your comments, your feedback, and any questions you have, and make sure you definitely connect with Dave as well. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.